Steve, I believe we're on the after lunch section, which is basically says review of morning concepts. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Let's see. Okay. Well, this PowerPoint I put together, and it has a lot of the pieces of what we saw before. It's just kind of suggestions I had for you all that might work for what you would want to do to manage your data there, because, again, you don't want to get too far away from the frozen data, and it's easy to get there if you're not paying attention. And, here's kind of an example of what our field office tech guide looks like. And we just have a folder for highly erodible interpretations that have the frozen list, K&T, I showed you that one, the calculation spreadsheet, and the LS factor chart. All of those kind of come together to make for your initial determinations and redeterminations for field. Thought I heard something, sorry. Anyway, that's just kind of an idea of what ours is. The one thing I will say is it's gotten a lot more difficult in general to manage the Soils Field Office Tech Guide. When we had the data mart, we were able to set up, basically it was a link, and it would point to the same place every time, and it would pick up everything that was new. Now that data mart's gone, we've had to go in, like where we have soils legend and hydric soils interpretations, we have prime farmland and stuff like that below there. We've had to generate the report, store it, save it back to Field Office Tech Guide. It takes an incredibly long time. The good news is once you get the HEL stuff done, it's done. And you don't have to look at it again. The downside is it is a tremendous amount of work. Jim drug out the binder there earlier. We were looking at it right before lunch. You've got a lot of data there, especially with the fact that you have different C factors under the wind erosion, and it'll be a little tricky to set that up. But I really think for the specialists in the areas, if they spend the time to put those into that during the long Colorado winters, maybe it'd be a good time to get that done. And again, take that advice for what it is. It's free. Worth what you paid for it, I guess. And then that's back to the example that we had before, nothing too exciting there. And then that's the spreadsheet and how the HEL list works in there. The county, pick the county and the map unit. Of course, 3 red arrows pop up just showing that it automatically populates the R, K, and T for you once you put in your different map units. I think that's probably the biggest time saver of all, not having to cross-reference. That can be a real hassle there. And that's just a review of that tab 2, which you guys saw in ad nauseum there. Because right now, apparently, as near as I could tell, your methodology is having to go in and find the class, whether it's for wind or for water, and then you have to go cross-reference against your frozen K and T values out of part 2. And then I also wanted to throw this in there, back to reinforcing why we have the frozen values. Why can't you just use Web Soil Survey? Well, right there we got the Epping silt loam, and it's got a K of 0.43. Kim, out of the Kim shingle, has a 0.37. When you look at the frozen values, the Kim is 0.32. Usually going up or down a class in K value will not affect an HEL determination a great deal, but it can. And either way, we're off by a class between the 0.37 and 0.32. So you're not using the right data, and it could get you wrong if it comes time for a review or something like that. So what I guess the main thing I wanted to bring out of that was, Web Soil Survey is the most up-to-date stuff, and it governs what's in RUSLE. And Jim's the one that does it, but every year when we're going to push our new data in this new model that Soil Survey is under, October 1, we should have all new data. Then we have to run all the access databases through RUSLE. There's a quick process that the state agronomist does, and it comes out as a database, and we ship it up to the nationals. The folks from nationals then put it on the main website, and that's where everybody in the field needs to update RUSLE. I threw that in there mainly because I'm acting as RUSLE manager since our state agronomist retired. There's a new one coming real soon, thank goodness, because I can open RUSLE and I can sort of make it do stuff, but I have no idea if it's right. So, again, back to the whole, things are frozen in time with USLE for the HEL lists, and Web Soil Survey is the most up-to-date. And again, it's bumped up that class and erodibility, so you don't want to get stuck using that in initial determination. And then, for other benefits, if you take that methodology and put the data into Excel, you can actually join that Excel map back into ArcGIS pretty easily and make thematic maps of HEL class. That's really a handy thing to do, because that way a lot of times you can eyeball these real quick. You're using the combination of GIS, like we had the question earlier, and just the eyeball method from 85. It gives us a lot of flexibility. If I can throw it up there and have it in red and green, and I can figure out that it's over 30% one way or the other, I'm good. I can just go on. So, like I said before, as those symbols and line work change with more MLRA projects down the road, you'll be happy if you've made a copy of the Sergo data, have it in the geodata folders, and you can go ahead and make that join to the ArcGIS classes from the Excel once you get that done, and then they're just there. It's all set up, ready to use, and nobody has to question. The way ours is, you go into our geodata drive, and then you open the soils. There's HEL purposes only, and then regular soils. So that way they know which one to go with, or current soils. I forget what we put that as exactly, but short and sweet, that's really all there was to it. And I do want to take a moment. Well, first off, I'll ask again, any questions from what we've covered thus far? If you're embarrassed to speak up, you can write your question on the back of a 230 amp Miller arc welder and send it to me at 200 North High Street. Okay, just giving you that option. So just a few documents that we have, and I'm going to leave copies of all these if anyone has an interest in picking this up. I mentioned a joint guidance earlier, and I'm not going to go through it and make you all read through it or anything, but just to give you an idea of what it looked like. And it's a terrible scan. I have no idea why my scan looks so bad, but what we do is we sat down with Stephen Meyer, our FSA state director, and Terry Cosby, our state con, after we had a couple of technical groups get together. And really, there's nothing in here that's counter to what's in the Food Security Act or the 6CP, but it is something that we've all agreed on to write in plain English. That was something they pushed for a while there, that everything should be in plain English. And it's not really easy to do. Even when we try to put it in plain English, it doesn't come out perfect. Obviously, there's too many acronyms and hassles you have to go through, but we did our best to distill it down and really lay out what the roles were for FSA, who needs to do this. Not speaking for you all again, but we had a lot of determinations that were coming in twice for who knows what reason. Maybe nobody checked the track file in the first place to see if there was one. Maybe the data wasn't updated. I'm going to assume that Colorado is pretty similar to Ohio in the sense that once you give back a determination for HEL or wetlands, for HEL they go and change the class in the attribute tables for ArcGIS, and then for the wetlands there are spot symbols. I hate the spot symbols for wetlands. I know that's not what we're talking about, but they're very difficult to understand. We have a lot of places where it's farm wetland, and PC all in the same field, and all you have are these dots. There's no line to it. So that's something that we try to address in here to at least make sure they're put in the right spot. And we're working on other possibilities on how to do that. Not to get tangential on wetlands, but these two are so intermixed, you really can't avoid it. So anyway, I'll leave this for everybody to take a look at. And I think it's been a very helpful document. It's been a kind of living thing. We have to keep changing as we go because you find where things that seem to make sense don't, and you have to rewrite them. One of the questions we got from the other day was letters about different functions of the compliance, and I do not have a reply letter for any of the HEL determinations or wetland determinations, but I'm assuming you have a fairly standard one somewhere that says, we reviewed your tract and we determined that this field is HEL and this field has a wetland, that sort of thing. But one thing I will mention, and I thought this was pretty interesting, we had a lot of people, like I said before, they're trying to clear every bit of woodland they can get because they want to produce more corn, but they're coming in and they're asking for these determinations, and we're able to kind of say, well, all right, here's all your spots, it's all there, we already know this one's been done. you don't need to move on with this, you can stop. So anything you can do to keep that data closer at hand. The hard part is, again, don't know how it is here, but it's on our S drive when FSA re-ups theirs once a week, maybe every 2 weeks. They push it to the S drive. We're exploring ways to try to find some sort of an image server that will always have that front and center to you. So you'll have it right there and be able to pull it up and see what's been done. That's kind of a handy thing to have. But anyway, the other thing that we did with the determinations was there's really no prescribed by the nationals, as far as I know, what kind of reply letter we have to send. And something we did that really helped a lot, I wish I had an example of it. When you send back that you have a wetland or you have HEL, it goes through all of their appeal rights. So, can anyone quote those off the top of their head? Me neither. It's pretty confusing when you start looking at, you've got the reconsideration, you got this, that, it goes all these branches. They just basically, one of our field offices, took the bottom part where it says, if you don't have any questions, you can just stop. He put all that in front of the appeal rights. And it said, if you're happy with this determination, stop reading here because it just gets confusing. Maybe it wasn't quite that simply worded, but it was close. And it really has cut down a lot, because we would have people call up and say, yeah, I got this PC and I'd like to challenge it. You don't want to challenge a PC. That's the thing you were looking for. But because they read through all of that appeal rights, that they felt like they needed to do something, and who knows what. I do have a copy of a letter that, and this one I'll leave to, with basically saying that this is a call from the compliance checks saying that something is out of compliance. And this is another one. They're all pretty flexible. There's lots of stuff you can put in this one. I just happen to have this one handy. But you notice it says it made a preliminary tech determination that they're not following a compliance conservation system. And I think that's kind of the key word, is keeping it in its system. Because if you say plan, they don't have to have it. It's little things like that that are worth putting in there. And again, you might have something very much like this, like gullies. We were just saying that's probably not a problem for you folks, but we document a lot of gullies. That's probably what knocks our folks out more than anything else. I don't remember if I said this on the BTC or off, but we had a winter where it thawed out the top 6 inches, got a couple of toad stranglers of rains, and it just gullied up people that have been no-till cover crop people for a long time. And that's almost something that the cover crops can work against you. They'll shade out that gully. You don't even know it's there. And next thing you know, somebody comes along to do a compliance and falls in that gully and says, hey, you weren't controlling what you were supposed to. So that's where it all gets back into the whole compliance part, where you deal with variances and this and that. And that's most definitely in the State Resource Con shop. I have no ability to make a call on how any of that works. In this case, this person actually did have a conservation plan that was in before 1996. I could tell just by the font. That was copied right out of somebody's paper. And the reason this was in here, it was a little bit confusing. But what they said was, you weren't following a conservation system on this tract, even though you have a conservation system on this other tract. That's why they put that in there. In other words, that was their way of setting it up to say, that you needed to be controlling your gullies and your sheet erosion. That was something that had to be done. And I would assume it would be no different for wind erosion either. You have to basically make that case that they knew what they were supposed to be doing. But to tie it back even further, in the first part when I was talking about how few people really understand what that 1026 is doing, I think it's worth maybe some outreach. We've been working with our public affairs to do more outreach, more documents into the papers and things like that, because I think a lot of times these people get a letter saying, hey, we're coming onto your farm and we're going to be doing this compliance check, and they have no idea why we're showing up. All they know is they had a contract with us, and that's that. They don't think about it. So anyway, a lot of this is just documenting the conditions there. And this particular letter doesn't have the caveat before the appeal options, but if I have my druthers, I think I'm going to try to get that one to become standard, because it does cut out a lot. I mean, here's everything that goes into the appeal options. And, you know, for a layperson that doesn't work with us day in, day out, that gets pretty confusing. Jim, do you remember anybody using mediation before?
I don't know.
Me neither. But it's in there, you know, so I have no idea where all of this goes. So that's the kind of thing where it's worth it to try to short circuit it. So anyway, that's just kind of the rest of that letter. It's there for your use. If you find anything useful out of it, great. Why won't that go away? Go away. Well, I'll open this up. So I already showed the one letter about the HEL determinations. You can do them in your own county now. That's been rescinded as far as the separation of duties. I don't know if I clearly enunciated it before, but my understanding is, though, for compliance, you still cannot do your own. You can't do compliance HEL. It has to be somebody else coming to your county to do it for you. Any adverse decision. So, and if an adverse decision would come up, that's where that letter I just showed was. Actually, I kind of did that out of order. I apologize. This is actually the base letter that we use just to let them know that we're coming out for compliance. And the actual dates, I think you have to send it out 15 days before you actually go on the farm to do the compliance check. And then you have to do it within 15 days of them getting it. So it's that total of 30 days, something like that. I always have to reread that part, but we are supposed to give them advance warning that we're coming out to check them. And, you know, as far as the conservation compliance goes, it's a lot of work to get those done and timed correctly. I always have a tough time figuring out how folks could do that. Next thing you know, you get caught with 6 days of rain. I'm assuming that happens quite a bit here with monsoon season, right?
Good,
yeah. But I guess this isn't technically HEL determinations. I know I'm kind of going into the compliance side, but I did notice there were some questions on that, so I wanted to cover those where I could. And again, I'm still counting on Jim to like smack me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff here. But with the status reviews, once they've been warned, they've got the 15 days. That's about all they really need to know on that part. The landowner does not have to be present, but they can be. I'd say it's probably about 50-50 for us. Some want to be there, some don't. Really doesn't change a whole lot for us. One other thing that you might find handy, no idea where this came from, and I'm definitely not going to claim it, but this is a tillage sheet for RUSLE 2. When you're going out and doing these compliance checks, you kind of have all this there for you that you can fill out whatever you need to. Kind of helps you when you go back. It's a structured way to figure out what operations you're going to put into RUSLE whenever it's time to run it and see if they're at 2T or 1T if they saw it busted. So, to be tangential, how much do you think is sod busted around here?
More than we would like.
Fair enough.
Yeah. No, some of it goes with commodity prices too.
Sure. Yeah.
There's when wheat got up to $10,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, holy cow, you know. But
And for those of you I've talked about sod busting, I don't think I ever clearly told you how you would know if it was sod busted. So that's where the original 026 comes into play. Before you go do these compliance checks, you would check the 026 and there should be a box on there, sod busted, yes or no. So that's how you know whether you're holding them to 2T or 1T when you do the compliance check. And again, I think this is a pretty handy tillage and rotation sheet there. One thing to note is if it is sod busted and you're running RUSLE for compliance, you can't use any of the effects. Let's say it was in prairie grass before they put it into commodity crop production. You can't use any of the effects of that grass that was there before they sod busted. That is considered not to be part of it. You start with the planting of, let's say, wheat, and you go from the rotation from there. So it's not like they had a year of sod in the rotation. So I don't have that written down anywhere. Sod buster doesn't happen a lot for us. Most everything was done long before we got there, and then there's some that happen now, but most of the woods that are coming out in the east are already in flat or depressional areas, so we don't run into a lot of it. So anyway, that's your sheet for that. I think I have shown everything else in here. It'll all be available for however you'd like to post it down the road. Before we went to lunch, you two were going to talk about the compliance stuff. I guess maybe, well, I'm going to backtrack again. I'm a terrible presenter. Any questions on the stuff that I covered just now? Anybody need me to do something there?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
It pertains to what our resources are in Colorado. Do we have, I know you shared your template letters. In Colorado, do we also have template letters? And if so, where do we find them?
Boy, there used to be an appendix in NAFSAM, and we had never done, to my knowledge, we didn't have Colorado canned boilerplate letters. What we were doing was pulling those out of the appendix in NAFSAM. And I'm not sure what the status is on that right now, whether there's boilerplate letters in NAFSAM. I don't believe so. I'd have to go back and look some more, but I haven't seen them in recent years.
I'm just kind of scrolling through here real quick. I can't remember if they were in here or if you had to go to a separate appendix to find them. But I can look at that a little bit closer so you don't have to watch that and risk having some kind of seizure while I go through this.
And I know from talking to some field offices that is a resource that would be put to use.
Understood. And we would probably go back to a hard copy appendix and borrow them again and check to make sure that the language is correct. Because I don't think anybody has invented any that are Colorado specific, not to my knowledge.
And sometimes it's just hard to keep up in general because the 1026 has changed over time, so has the 026. For a while there, they had the 026 that had 2 signature blocks. You signed it once at the end and then again after 30 days. That's gone again. And I only found out by talking to our state biologist. I had no idea it was gone. It's not like they send out some kind of all employees letter that says, stop using this. They just change the form at the national level. And if you don't go get it from a certain period of time, you have no idea that it changed. It's no less valid. It just looks weird, and the 30 days before these determinations become final is kind of strange. How do you deal with that? We don't have a really good system, to be honest. By the time it's done, what we've been told at FSA is they don't want to see the letter until their appeal rights are exhausted, until all 30 days are gone. So we basically just have another folder that we stick everything in, and we say, check it every 30 days and see which one's passed, which it's a bad system, but I don't know how else to do it. One thing I was kind of hopeful for, there is a program through Microsoft, and I don't think this will ever fly, but if someone else is better at getting stuff pushed through than I am, I think it's called, well, let me see here. InfoPath, that's the one I was looking for. Microsoft InfoPath is designed to move forms all around between SharePoints. So if you have each area with a SharePoint and then the state office, it can originate at one and then go around and get signatures and do all that stuff. It's really a handy thing. In Ohio, we had, and you probably do too here, they closed ours, but it was the Office of General Counsel was downstairs, and I used to go ask them questions. The one I wanted was an electronic version of the 1026. They could come in, fill it out, then they would go ahead and digitally sign it somehow. Then it would start the rotation. It would go to who it needed to go to, and that would be that. They freaked out. Changing a government form is not simple. And to be honest, a lot of what I've heard is that with the newest iterations of Toolkit, Customer Service Desktop, whatever it's called these days, whenever it comes around, is going to take care of some of those things. So I don't know if it's a project worth pursuing, but it's interesting. So if someone makes it happen, just remember, I told you it might be possible. So yeah, that's one thing we looked at, but I kind of lost my train of thought on all that. Oh yeah, the 1026s and 026s. Just keep an eye on them because they do change. I don't know the best methodology because even trying to maintain them on the SharePoint in Ohio State Office, we don't know when they change. So it's almost something you just have to remember to check from time to time. But I've still never seen a form change to where they said, that one doesn't work anymore, that's not valid, you know. One thing you will see too, speaking of changes in forms, the certified wetland determinations and were the ones that were in 85 to 90, the non-certified, I should say. You know, those come up too. It's, again, not particularly related to HEL, but it's worth knowing that they're out there for those of you that have both duties. I'm assuming there's a few that do. So, all right. I guess back to the compliance question, can I ask you two to go back over what you were saying about if you go out and you've never worked with the person and all that? Do I need to move that or it should go?
Yeah, Lon, if you're going to talk, you might want to come up a little closer. This won't go much further.
Okay.
Let's go a little further. It's going to go.
It was just that in some field offices, you run up against the problem of files, you're not having what they would call track files. Especially if offices have moved, things have been stored in different places. And when you go in to do the compliance reviews, and you're trying to get whatever the history is on that track, and you have no idea, we have nothing to find on that track. FSA might have some stuff, but they usually don't keep a lot of, well, at least what I've read, we don't have as much information as we would need to go out and do the reviews. Do you redo a conservation plan so that you have something on that tract in your office, or you just go and do a review, figure out what their system is that they're working with now, run it through RUSLE, call it good, or you try to create a file for them so you have it on that tract?
And my response was, if they don't ask you for a conservation plan, you don't write one, right? And the only reason why it came up on a random track list would be because they took a payment. Now, if it was not a payment for equip, maybe they took a wool payment, okay? So they show up on a random track list because they took a wool payment. And they've never had a conservation plan with us. Okay, then you're in that puts you in a situation where you have to get enough information from them to create their system in WEPS, in RUSLE, and evaluate their system using current technology. That's the only option you have. You wouldn't write a conservation plan unless they asked you to. Okay. Now, if it's a situation where you've they've been an equip or something and they're doing practices, they're applying, then they've got a cons plan that you can evaluate with current technology. So I'm not sure how that works. But I sure wouldn't write a con. There's no reason to write a cons plan unless they request it.
And even then, go ahead.
I have a question that is somewhat related and probably somewhat not. So if we want to keep on this topic, I can hold off on my question.
Yeah, can I say one thing while I still have my train of thought? Because it's
Sure.
fleeting usually. Once you've gone out for a conservation compliance review, you're no longer there for technical help. So if you show up and the place is a mess and they say, yeah, I really need help, it's kind of too late at that point. There is a part of the manual that talks about, let's say you go out, like Jim was saying, to write an equip contract, and you look around and say, dude, this is a mess. We need to fix this somehow. So then they can work with you to put together a conservation plan, and they have time to put it into effect. The relatively standard numbers would be They have 45 days to adopt a con plan and a year to implement. And that's saying, if you come out and find a problem with eligibility on a standard technical visit, once you've gone out as a compliance review, it's on. Like Lana was saying, all you can do is go off of what they have, what was their system. You run it through RUSLE. If they're out, they're out. Then it moves on to the whole, goes to county committee, goes to reconsideration, whatever appeal rights go along with that. So there's a real fine line between those two, and I can't remember the section off the top of my head, but it's in there if you look under technical assistance. So, I'm sorry, what was your question?
Sorry, I was on mute. My question has to do with anticipated workload for the new farm bill and folks that are not NRCS or FSA participants, and what you might anticipate in terms of workload coming our direction, and how our workflow might be different for non-NRCS FSA participants.
To start, I guess, if I was clairvoyant, I'd already have a winning lottery ticket. I probably wouldn't be talking here today. But if I were taking a guess, I think the workload is most definitely going to increase. And there are going to be people that have never worked with us in the past coming in, wanting a determination one way or another. On the bright side, you just have to explain to them, well, actually, you don't even have to explain it, but it's worth explaining the 1026 that they are going to be expected to have a conservation system for HEL. They're expected not to take out wetlands. If they're not sure if they're wetlands, they need to talk to us. And I can't really make a guess. Maybe Jim's heard something I haven't, but I'll be very curious to see what happens more so on the wetland side than the HEL side. I think there will be an increased workload with HEL, no doubt, because they're going to be coming in. But what happens to somebody who wasn't a producer with us for years and years, and they blew away, 10 acres of hydric soils and vegetation, and they had no idea it was a wetland or that was even one of our rules? I don't know if we're going to make them go back and mitigate that, or if it's going to be a clean slate that says, starting now, you can't wipe out any more wetlands. And I really have not heard anything one way or the other. Jim, has that come across your desk?
No. That would be for Tim.
So if someone comes into the field office and says, I'm in insurance, I participate in insurance and I need an HEL determination, their first step is to fill out a 1026?
Yep.
And what if they don't have a delineated tract and fields?
They need to go to FSA first then.
Okay.
Yep.
So FSA first get those things delineated, then 1026, and then there's a HEL determination. Mm-hmm. And then what about the system documentation and or conservation plan?
Like we were talking about before, there's really none required to be truly documented, because by signing that 1026, they're certifying that they realize they have to follow one, and that's kind of where it ends. Now, if they ask for a con plan, then the workload is going to shift to the soil con or the DCE in that particular area to write it. Now, on both sides, I don't know how that falls into the workload, because in the Food Security Act, it has a very prescribed set of when a 569 comes in as a wetland or HEL complaint, that goes to the top of the list to get done. People that are getting farm loans are at the top of the list, and then it just keeps going down the line as to who's number one. So I'm assuming they're going to have to rewrite the Food Security Act manual to say that where do the crop insurance non-cooperators fall into that list. And I really don't know, but that's probably going to be one of the biggest hurdles we're going to have, is to explain to them, you don't get a con plan unless you ask for it, like Jim was saying. But at the same time, they do have to understand what they're expected to do, which is why I've been working with public affairs that we really need to do something about this. On a related tangent, we've been working on a process to get our wetland determinations going faster. I mean, going to this assigned conservationist has definitely slowed us down. I mean, it's not simple to get somebody to drive even 20 minutes to come over and do a wetland determination, you know, because that's who has scanned slides and all those sorts of things, or excuse me, the slides. We don't have them scanned yet. But anyway, as we're working on that kind of stuff, we're realizing that, again, these people have no idea what in the world they're signing. They're signing a 1026 and they move on. And then they'll get some HEL or wetland determination later and they say, oh, okay, great, you know. So we're trying to get them to where they understand the whole thing, that they have to sign it. It's continuous. That's been a difficult one. We have some people that come in and sign up every year, put every tract they own, and ask for a wetland and HEL determination on every tract. They don't need to do that. Once they've done it once, it stays in perpetuity until they drop out of programs. So, you know, all of that stuff will be balled in together, but back to the workload on the con plans will only be the ones that ask for them, and there's always technical assistance, you know, back to the con 6s too. That's where if I were one that had done the HEL or the wetlands and sent it off to them, they called me back and said, what does this mean? I would document in the con 6 note in that track file and say, Joe called me back, I told him this is what the Food Security Act wants, encouraged him to go talk to Lana because she can help him with a con plan. You know, that way you get some documentation that this person understands what they did. And I understand documenting is a pain. Sometimes documenting what you did takes longer than what you did, but unfortunately we kind of have to. Was that close enough?
Yes.
I'm just kind of shifting through here to see if I missed anything in particular. I don't think that I did. I guess at this point, we're open for questions, and I'll entertain whatever wetlands come by. If somebody has one, some of it I can't speak on because that's a very state-specific type of thing, so I don't want to get too far into it. But if you have any questions on compliance, you've got Jim here. It's a fantastic time. Soils, BJ's here. Can you tell I'm trying to deflect any questions? Lana, she's laughing. She said she'll do plenty.
So, and again, I can't see the Greeley folks. We're just seeing the wall there again, so we don't know if you guys have any questions or not. But now, yeah, we're going to shift over to the Q&A portion. The presentation slides are done at this point. Yep. We presented the information, and if there is anything that we haven't covered, we tried to address, and thank you, Teresa, for sending the questions in previously. I thought that was a great idea. And hopefully Steve and I met yesterday and tried to incorporate some of them into the presentations today. And then I know Steve worked hard to try and make sure he answered them throughout the day if they weren't in the presentation. So if there are additional things that you want to highlight, or if there are any of those questions in that list that were sent up that specifically from Area 1, then we can go ahead and readdress those or make sure that they got answered that meets your needs. So we'll just go ahead and open it up. And if there's anybody, it looks like Greeley maybe just signed off. So.
You made him mad.
So maybe Greeley's gone now. But, so we'll have this opportunity, and if nothing else, then that's fine too.
I always have lots of questions. I have got another question.
Great.
So I'm still a little bit confused about documenting a conservation system. So I know the steps, we talked about those steps a minute ago. Then there's an HEL determination. Mm-hmm. But from what I understand is that then you have to identify or help with the application of a conservation system that meets the soil reduction or improvement criteria.
Right.
So is that not a requirement, or is that a requirement sometimes and not others? How do I know when it's necessary to document the conservation system?
Okay. So what you're asking about is off of this substantial reduction there, that they are, in fact, putting forth a system. Actually, it's probably better in this one, where it's saying that it was planned after 96. Let's assume the vast majority are that. and the system to be applied meets the criteria for the substantial reduction. So I guess the main thing to all this is that there really is no documentation that is required on this. Really, it's up to the landowner or producer, I should say. I keep saying landowner, but it's really the producer's issue to make sure that they're in bounds with the 1026 that they've signed. So this is kind of where it goes from, we use CTA money to do the HEL determination all the way down to, let's say, HEL ground. And then once that's done, the ball really goes into the producer's court. They are the ones that need to ask Lana for a conservation plan if they want something written, or it can be as simple as, I don't know if this is the right terminology, but a technical visit. You know, they could just call you up and say, hey, can you come out and look at this? And she could probably take something like that RUSLE tillage guide or tillage worksheet I gave, take it out there, write down whatever his system was, and then when I was done with it, I would probably put it in the conservation plan, the folder there, and probably put a copy in with the track file just to show that I did talk to them about this. But again, it kind of comes out of hands. You're a resource law scientist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you've done your part and handed off the determination, it's pretty much theirs to do with what they want. They can roll the dice on not doing any kind of system or follow-up or plan and see if they get caught on a random check or a 569. I know that's a big hobby in some of our counties, is turning in your neighbor for stuff, but I don't know if it happens everywhere. But, you know, the other option is, you know, they can go and do whatever they need to work through the district conservationist or conservationist, I should say, in their county to get something. And again, whether they want to document it formally or not, that's okay. But I think part of what you're asking too is, what documentation do you need for a compliance whenever you're actually running the RUSLE to say, yeah, they're in or out? Would that be a portion of what you're asking?
That would be a good follow-up question.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to know that too. That's great.
Yeah. To me, it's more or less taking their word for it, unless you can see they're just flat out lying. You know, typical rotation for us is corn, beans, wheat. Wheat is getting less into the rotation, typically corn, beans. But, you know, if you're standing out there and you see no corn stubble and they claim that they planted it last year, then you could come into another problem. That's case by case. Probably need to talk to the state resource con. But if they would tell me that they no-tilled their beans and tilled their corn with chisels, they usually know that stuff, and you can just take it right with that, and that's what you plug and chug with into RUSLE there. Again, unless you see something that looks really fishy, that there's no way in the world they're doing what they said they did. Like moldboard plow, those are pretty obvious to tell when they did it. Thank goodness we don't see a lot of it. But mostly you're taking their word for it. Like Jim was saying before, some keep records. If they can pull out records, great. I've seen some people take it as far as double checking them against the FSA records for their production. I don't think I would go that far. As long as I felt that they were being honest with me and doing what they were supposed to and telling the right rotation, I'd run RUSLE and see where it was at. One question we ran into, this is tangential but related, is you know, what happens if they're out on HEL? We're kind of struggling through that because, like I said, this year we've had a lot more people out than usual. And my understanding is that HEL is not like wetlands. If you clear wetlands in Ohio and you farm in Colorado and Ohio, you lose all your benefits in both states for as far back as when you converted that wetland. So if it was 96, you might owe $600,000. Who knows? So you mitigate. With HEL, there's a little bit more flexibility, and it comes down to they can declare you out on one field, or they can declare you out on the whole operation. When I say they, I mean FSA. My understanding is all this happens at the county committee level. Once you have made that initial call that they're out because of your RUSLE run, then they're going to go ask for, typically it's the word just left me there, good faith waiver. You know, basically saying, we didn't know we did wrong, so, you know, can we get a reduced penalty? And most times that does happen. And speaking entirely for me, I think that's a good thing. Some people get upset that we don't hold people's feet to the fire enough on HEL, but I think that's what we're here for. We're a voluntary organization. Why shouldn't we be keeping them in compliance? If it means a wake-up call and they get a little fine and then they go back to what they're supposed to do, I think that's well worth it, as opposed to really trying to lower the boom on somebody. That was more philosophical than you were looking for, but...
Did you? So that was Grand Junction, still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else, Francine or Teresa? Anybody out there? I see Ed left.
It's gone. No, I don't think I have anything. Nope, I'm good. Okay.
Right.
No, I think we're okay on this end.
Okay. Are we good here in the room? Is there anything else? Did anybody have? Gene, do you have anything you want to say to the group while we got them here, or you just stepping in to say hi?
Just stepping in to say hi, and
Okay.
glad you're doing this.
Yeah, great.
Well, just so you know, the State Resource Con is standing off camera in case anybody wants to ask him any questions. All right, that's fine. For those of you who hung in there, I appreciate your time and asking questions, and I'm always looking to do better. So if there's something I could have covered better, or if there's something you don't like in my examples, send them up to BJ. He'll send them on. I got thick skin. I can take it.
Yeah, he's pretty good about that. And also,
That
go
was
ahead.
great. Thank you very much. I do have one last question, and that is for the folks that are going to be watching this after the fact. Where are all of these resources, like, you know, the PowerPoints and the spreadsheets, et cetera, going to be found?
I'll post them on the Colorado SharePoint page under the Soils tab. And I'll just put a file in there that says June of 14 HEL training. And I'll put all the files that Steve's created in there, and all of his PowerPoint presentations will be located in there. So just go ahead and navigate over to the Colorado SharePoint and look for that under the Soils tab.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And for those of you that are still out there, maybe the camera just went out, but I would appreciate that if you sat in on this today, just drop me an email, an evaluation, how you thought this went, if this met the needs of the requests that came up, even just a good job or a bad job, just anything, so I know what your thoughts were on the training, and we'll file those. And Steve and I will visit again with those, and then I'll take those up to Maria, and her and I will visit, because she was asking about some evaluations for this. So I'd appreciate that if you could do that. And if nothing else, I want to thank Steve for coming out and doing this for us. We appreciate your time, and I hope everybody learned at least something, and we walk away from this as a positive experience. And at least we're all on the same page, so that's the important part. So if nothing else, thanks much.